All right, today we're going to go over our evaluating thesis statement assignment. First things first, it's very important to understand what a well-written thesis statement looks like and what it contains. So, most simplistically, a thesis statement is a position on the topic that someone is writing about. That position needs to be defensible, meaning that the author needs to state a direct claim. They do not need to qualify. To qualify means to say, well, I kind of think both sides are right. That's a really hard argument to prove. So when we're creating a thesis statement in AP Lang, we need to pick one position and stick with it, and then prove it in our writing, in our body paragraphs. So a well-written thesis is defensible. Then a well-written thesis responds to the prompt or is on topic. So if the paper is asking you to determine whether the voting age should be 16 or 18, and you talk about why do we even have a voting age, you're not really on the prompt. You're kind of breaching the topic, but you didn't answer the question in your writing, so your thesis statement wouldn't be well written. Then your thesis statement needs to uncover very specific things that you plan to talk about in your writing. We're going to dive into that a little bit more in our assignment today. But before we do that, let's look at questions to ask when developing a thesis. This is my favorite thing to do to see if my thesis is well written, defensible, responds to the prompt, and then it's a great way to check and make sure that my writing and my body paragraphs supports, defends my thesis. All right, let's dive into it. So first things first, did I answer the question? Did I respond to the prompt? You'll need to reread the prompt, then reread your thesis and make sure you did just that. Have I taken a position that others might challenge or oppose? If you did, well done. You created a defensible thesis. If your thesis just simply states the facts, such as Miss Cook created a persuasive argument, well, that's just a fact. How did I do it? Give me more information. That could be a defensible thesis. And so make sure that you're not just spewing out facts. Make sure that you're giving something that is really specific, because we could argue, did I create a persuasive argument or did I not? Yes and no, but you weren't as specific, and you really need to be. That goes into our third point. Is my thesis statement specific enough? In AP Lang, we will talk a lot about rhetorical choices. If you just put the author used rhetorical choices, you're not being specific. What rhetorical choices did they use? What are you going to write about? Your reader doesn't know unless you tell them. Make sure you're being specific. Then the so what, how, and why tests are my favorite to go through when you're actually writing your paper. If a reader can go, well, why should the voting age be 16 when reading your paper? You should answer those questions in your body paragraphs and tell them just that. Or, how can we change the voting age? Well, maybe your paper uncovers that as well. So make sure that when you are writing your thesis and after you've written your paper, you're answering all these questions, because it helps you to create a well-written thesis and then a well-written paper that backs up and supports your thesis. All right, let's dive into today's assignment. So this is an AP language prompt that you see right here. The first part, that paragraph that is centered on the page, is always the instructions for an AP prompt. You're going to read this to yourself before you go into the passage. The passage is always whatever author's writing. It could be an essay, it could be a speech. Sometimes it could be an advertisement. So in this case, it is a speech, and our prompt tells us that. So take about 1 to 2 minutes to read this prompt to yourself before diving into the passage, and then we'll go over it together. Go ahead and pause the video so you can start your timer. All right, let's get back together now. I'm going to read the prompt to you, and then I'll give you time to read the passage. Alfred M. Green, our author, delivered the following speech, we know what type of text it was, in Philadelphia in April 1861. We know context. The first month of the Civil War. More context and a little bit of exigence. African Americans were not yet permitted to join the Union Army. Context again. But Green felt that they should strive to be admitted to the ranks and prepared to enlist. Read the speech carefully. Here's where the instructions begin in your prompt. Then write an essay in which you analyze the methods that Greene uses to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. Okay, so we know just by reading this prompt who our author is, we know that it was a speech, we know about context, and then we know what the point of this passage was or what's the purpose. This author, Alfred M. Greene, wrote this speech to try and persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. Now, I know if I was writing this essay, when I read the passage, I need to determine how and by what specific choices Greene used in order to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. Now, take 5 minutes to read this passage to yourself. Go ahead and pause this video, set a timer for 5 minutes. While you're reading the passage, write down specific choices made by Greene in order to persuade his audience, an audience of his fellow African Americans, in order to join the Union forces. Remember, rhetorical choices are anything the author used in order to persuade his audience. All right, good luck. Remember to pause the video. All right, welcome back. Now that you have read this passage, you understand a little bit more about the choices Greene made. So now we're going to dive into today's assignment. Make sure that you have the choices that you annotated written on a piece of paper next to you, because you'll need them when we evaluate thesis statements. Because remember, a well-written thesis statement goes over specific rhetorical choices, in this case when we're analyzing rhetoric. Okay. Using the checklist on the right-hand side, identify whether the following thesis statements satisfy the 3 essential criteria, which is listed below, for a thesis statement. If you determine that the sample would not earn a point, meaning it's not well written, then you'll need to rewrite the thesis statement in the lines or the space provided below. So what we're doing today is we are evaluating thesis statements. We're evaluating them with 3 criteria. Does it respond to the prompt? Is it a defensible thesis? Does it uncover rhetorical choices? Choices is plural, meaning they can't just list 1. 2 is probably not going to cut it. They need at least 3 or more. All right. Here's the prompt again, and it just gives you the instructions, not the rest of that context. So the prompt reads one more time, write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices, plural, that Greene, our author, uses to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. So you know that your author needs to respond to this and needs to make sure that they're creating this argument. So how did he persuade his audience? What did he use? Okay, sample 1. Greene uses rhetorical choices to bring up the past mistreatment of African Americans. Now, we need to dive into this thesis, deconstruct it, and determine if it meets the following criteria. Number 1, does it respond to the prompt? Okay. Analyze the rhetorical choices Greene used to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. Does it respond to that? Well, it kind of responds to the prompt. It talks about Greene and it talks about some things he said in the passage, but it doesn't give specific rhetorical choices. And it's not really a defensible thesis. I can't really argue it. So I don't think so. So for that, I would put no, it doesn't meet that criteria. And then is it defensible? Can I argue this? No, it's kind of a statement. Does it analyze rhetorical choices? Well, it says rhetorical choices, but it doesn't actually list any specific choices. I don't think this thesis meets the criteria. So I'm going to have to rewrite it. So the choices that you wrote down while you were annotating, this is the time for you to actually put those choices in because you're going to write up this thesis statement. So if it were me, I wrote down a few, and I'm going to try and put those in. So I might say instead, Greene uses a sense of patriotism, or better yet, let's use a different rhetorical verb. Greene instills a sense of patriotism with his audience. He discusses how he builds a counter argument. Okay, that could be a good one. And see, I'm thinking out loud right now. I'm kind of brainstorming what I found in the passage. He talked about, maybe I forgot something. So maybe I need to look up here. Okay. This first part, he's building a counter argument. So I'm going to jot that down in my note. Our duty, our brethren, is not to conveal over past grievances. Let us honor the glory achieved by our fathers. Okay, so he talks about how God protects the righteous, or the right, those who are doing what they should. Remember to. Okay, perfect. So I found two really specific things that I might want to talk about. So, Green instills a sense of patriotism and a sense of loyalty under God in order to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. It's not the most incredible thesis, but it responds to the prompt, it's defensible, and it analyzes two specific rhetorical choices: a sense of patriotism and the right under God to do the right thing, to be a righteous person by joining the Union forces and protecting your country. So let's scroll down to sample 4. In April 1861, a month after the Civil War began, Alfred Greene gave an inspiring speech to his African American brethren in which he compels them to join the Union Army by highlighting the bravery of their predecessors, informing them that God protects the right, and invoking a sense of responsibility to help their enslaved brothers. Wow, I think that's a well-written thesis, but let's see if it meets the criteria. Does it respond to the prompt? Yeah, it does, because it's talking about how Greene created a persuasive argument in order to encourage his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. Well done. Does it make a defensible claim? Can we argue this? Yeah, someone could say that none of this is correct, or that all of it is. Perfect. Does it analyze specific rhetorical choices? Okay, let's look and try and find them. Gave an inspiring speech in which he, compels them to join the Union Army by highlighting the bravery of their predecessors, 1 choice, informing them that God protects the right, 2 choice, or 2nd choice, and invoking a sense of responsibility to help their enslaved brothers, 3rd choice. This meets all the criteria. So in this assignment, I wouldn't have to rewrite this. I would simply type meets all the criteria, or you could just highlight that and move on. All right, so this was today's lesson. You have the other samples to go through on your own. So sample 1 we did together and sample 4. You have sample 2, sample 3, sample 5, and sample 6. Then, after sample 6, once you're finished, you're going to try and write your own original thesis statement in which you discuss the rhetorical choices, you respond to the prompt, you make a defensible claim. All right, well done. If you have any questions, email Mr. Wood or myself. We're happy to help you. Good luck.